In this world, there are a few fundamental resources we need to actually survive. Food, shelter, and water. But what happens when one of those resources becomes contaminated? So right now, I'm at the HAW River. It's one of the more prominent rivers in North Carolina. It's also the main watershed of the Piedmont region within the state, but it also provides drinking water to over 700,000 residents of NC. Needless to say, this is a very important part of North Carolina's ecosystems. And it's also very important to the drinking structure of the state as well. However, despite the fact of how crucial this river is, it's also endangered.
Unfortunately, it is downstream of a lot of pollution sources, Greensboro, Burlington, and even some tributaries that get polluted.
You see, the HAW is victim to a problem that has been plaguing water bodies across our nation for a long, long time. Pollution. That pollution comes from a death of 1 million different paper cuts. For instance, the HAW is polluted by many different various forms of natural resources, like sediment.
It's kind of hard to think about sediment being a pollutant though, right? Because it's just dirt, or it's just soil. But when soil's not in the right place, or when it's not where it's supposed to be, right, then it is a concern.
But in recent years, the HAW has also become impaired by a type of chemical known as an emergent contaminant. Basically, in simple terms, it's a chemical that's just being discovered that could have negative health effects for the health of an ecosystem, but also the health of drinkers as well. Specifically, in the case of the HAW, we're looking at two major emerging contaminants, PFAS and 1,4-dioxane.
Both of those chemicals are actually considered forever chemicals. They will bioaccumulate, which means they do not break down in your bodies, in our bodies, but also wildlife, the bodies of wildlife. So if these forever chemicals are in fish, for example, and the birds eat the fish, it's going to end up in that bird as well. So it makes its way from aquatic to terrestrial very easily.
PFAS, again, one of those two chemicals, has been the subject of many studies since it was labeled an emerging contaminant in 2014. That includes the research of PhD student Anna Boatman at UNC Chapel Hill.
Yeah, so we looked at fish from the HAW River and Jordan Lake. Unsurprisingly, the HAW River fish had more different kinds of PFAS in them and also higher levels.
As both of these emerging contaminants spread throughout the HAW system and ultimately end up in the drinking water of many NC residents, they could pose severe negative health effects for many drinkers.
Some of the most common ones are increased cholesterol, kidney disease, thyroid disease, and they've also been shown to cause cancer in some cases.
While PFAS have been harder to control since they were labeled in 2014, the story is a little bit different for 1,4-dioxane.
So what happened was 1,4-dioxane made the list of unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, and a lot of drinking water utilities were tasked with monitoring for 1,4-dioxane.
As Greensboro started to track sources of 1,4-dioxane, they found two big contributors, their own wastewater treatment plant and a chemical plant called HAW. It turns out both were doing so without the knowledge that they could be causing harm.
After it was found in Greensboro, we actually entered into a special order by consent with the state of North Carolina, which created a 3-year plan to reduce the amount of 1,4-dioxane that's discharged at our wastewater treatment plant. We originally were asked to reduce it to 45 and then down to 35, then 31.5, and then 23. Which was our lowest number that we told the state we could comply. But we feel like we've found our two main contributors of the compound, and those two contributors have actually discontinued, for the most part, discharging 1,4-dioxane.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're excited. It's a 97% decrease. Yeah.
But even with the lowering of chemicals like 1,4-dioxane, others like PFAS still loom large, and they take tolls as well. In response to multiple incidents over the past few years, the town of Pittsburgh had to spend roughly $30 million on new water filtration systems.
The people upstream, the industries that are discharging, are not paying for Pittsburgh to put this expensive treatment technology in. Pittsburgh's own customers are paying, and that's not fair. And that is, one of the big issues about this stuff entering the HAW, is that it's really not an equitable situation. If you don't have the filtration system, the people pay with their health. If you put the filtration system in, people pay with higher water bills. Meanwhile, industry upstream is like la-di-da.
There are both ups and downs when it comes to protecting the HAW and ecosystems like the HAW as well, showcased by the stories of these two different chemicals. But many of the people fighting to protect the river believe in its cause.
It can be discouraging at times, absolutely, like you're fighting a losing battle every single day. But then other days, I see how many volunteers show up to a stream cleanup, and it reminds me that it's an important job, and a lot of people are interested in our water quality.
So, to answer the question of what happens when an invaluable resource to human life becomes contaminated, in the case of the HAW, issues. Many, many, many issues. But those issues bring people together. They spur action, and ultimately, they might even bring change. Thank you.